Hello, dear learners of English and potential candidates for Cambridge exams. I think I'm talking to those who are going to take the CAE, or as it is now called C1, or CPE C2 exam. I was asked to share some of the insights and give some tips as an ex-Cambridge examiner with quite a big working experience. First, let me give some credentials, that is to explain why I'm taking the liberty of giving advice in these matters. As for my educational background, I graduated from St. Petersburg, actually from Leningrad State University, the philological faculty in 1989. And after some 7 or 8 year break, I started working there and had been working at St. Petersburg State University, philological faculty, for approximately 25 years until last May when I left the place. Currently, I'm working at so-called St. Petersburg State University of Trade Unions. So my teaching experience amounts now to approximately 34 years. As for my examining experience, it is slightly shorter, unsurprisingly. Since 1996, I was working with the British Council, their St. Petersburg office, until they were closed in 2006. And after that, I continued the examiner activities with the office which was called LT Pro and specialized in delivering Cambridge exams. So my examiner experience covers, okay, let's say more than 20 years. I started my examining career with the exam that hardly anyone remembers. Nowadays, it was called BULATS, BULATS, and it followed their general principles of Cambridge exams, but was rather specific. And then gradually, I got the qualifications for the, well, what do we call it? For the minor suite of exams and then for the main suite. So for a number of years, I had 7 qualifications, that is young learners, CAT, PET, FCE, CAE, and CPE. In addition to that, in 2006, I passed IELTS exam with a total score of 8.5 with 9s for reading and speaking. And practically 2 months later, started practicing as an IELTS examiner, which I also had been doing until spring of 2022. Then, as all my colleagues, I became an ex-examiner. I had a chance to continue this activity in one of Kazakhstan offices, but travel issues and some practical issues became obstacles. So I haven't been taking part in real-time exams, but have conducted quite a number of mock exams since then, have given lots of feedback in these mock exams, covering all levels from young learners to CP. So I hope I'm still in quite a good shape for an ex-examiner. That is why I'm here to share with you some, as I already said, some insights that I've been accumulating for these 20 plus years. First and foremost, I would like to dispel some myths, quite, quite consistent, should I say, quite common among the candidates, and unfortunately among quite a number of teachers, tutors, preparing for these exams. I know for sure that this is not the case with the person who asked me to make this recording, but still, certain misconceptions are quite widely spread. And I would like to dispel three of these myths. One concerning the examiners, another concerning the candidates themselves, and one more which deals with the content, with the language issue, with what actually is said by the candidate at the exam. So starting with the examiner's issue, there are these rumors, myths that there are kind examiners and strict examiners, that it's easier to take the exam in Finland because examiners there are more lenient. It's a very frightening, a very scary experience if your examiner is a Russian speaker, not an English speaker, and well, let's say a person in their 40s, 50s, or older. Actually, don't think there are any candidates in the 60s. I haven't seen any. But that it is much easier to deal with a younger examiner, and best of all, of course, is to deal with a native speaker. Well, let me tell you, all this is sheer nonsense. It's not like this. It doesn't work like this. All of us examiners uh, used to go through quite serious, quite rigorous training at the beginning of our careers, and then year in, year out, every year we had to take a recertification. So as I've been saying, every year, every examiner, regardless of their nation, race, gender, age, or years of experience, has to take quite a rigorous recertification. It was always done online, even in the pre-lockdown times. So to take part in the exam session, exam period in March, we all had a certain deadline in February, sometimes even the end of January, when for all the qualifications one had, you had to go this recertification procedure. I'm not at liberty of describing it in detail, but uh, it was about professional behavior and the most significant thing about assessment. So those who passed their recertification were sure to be assessing the candidate's performance in strict accordance with Cambridge rules and regulations, following the criteria very strictly, the criteria which I have here at hand just in case, but actually know by heart. You could, and you still can, wake me in the dead of night and I would tell you what a person is expected to do or at any level of English proficiency in any of on any of the criteria: lexical resource, pronunciation, interactive communication, whatever. So no matter what the examiner's background was, and believe me, well, people with insufficient methodological background, with unsatisfying language skills, just were never admitted to this kind of job. Uh, Examiners were, and I'm sure are, all the same. As I very often tell my students, the examiner is a creature who has no nation, no gender, no age, no personal preferences or biases. He or she, well, they are generally friendly, but not too friendly, well-meaning, but not lenient. Whatever they do is done to help the candidate to show their best, and they will forget about a candidate 2 minutes after the door of the exam room is closed. Otherwise, the examiner's brain would just burst out, listening to, well, 7 or 10 or 12 or more interviews per day. So, in a nutshell, it absolutely doesn't matter where you take the exam, who your examiners are, the interlocutor, the one who organizes the interaction, and the assessor who just sits somewhere rather close so that they can hear everything properly, but are, well, not within one's vision. It doesn't matter who they are all equally qualified, friendly, objective, and professional. Now, moving on to another myth concerning the other candidates. Very many people feel nervous about these exams. For example, those who've had some experience of IELTS, which is done one-to-one, the examiner and the candidate, they feel nervous about what kind of partner I will get. Who will be my partner, the other person in this candidate pair? What if I get a very weak partner or a very strong partner and will look bad compared to him or her? Well, don't worry. The exam, I mean, each exam of Cambridge suites, starting with a CAT, the first one, which is done in the format 2-to-2, two candidates, two examiners. Uh, each of them is designed so that it doesn't matter what kind of two people are doing it in a pair. Candidates are never assessed in comparison to one another. Every candidate is assessed as if he or she is the one and only. Like no one else exists. Just this person is under the scrutiny of the examiners. The interlocutor who gives a global mark, that is a general impression mark, based on very strict and clear criteria, but still more general than the other set of marks given by the assessor, who works with the, in the case of C1 and C2 exams, 5 criteria, which you certainly know. I will go through them a bit later. So, no matter how weak or strong, talkative or shy and silent your partner is, it does not affect how you personally are assessed. The two parts where the other candidate can have some impact, not on your performance, not on your assessment, but just on the procedure of the exam, are part 1, and in C1 it is part 3, in C2 it is part 2, the part devoted to the collaborative task. When the candidates cooperate, do some problem-solving task, that is, talk together. And as I've said, it's only the procedure. Talking about part 1, what everyone should keep in mind, the candidates and their tutors, is that 2 minutes a pair of candidates is given for part 1 is a very short time. Just, I would say, desperately short time. And there are these questions like, your names are, and where are you from, and how long have you been learning English, and what aspect of English do you enjoy most, or what aspect of English do you find challenging? All these questions, they are to be asked. Examiners can't skip this part. And only what is left after these questions are asked can be devoted to some more questions, personal, but never too personal. Remember, you'll never be asked about politics, religion, or health matters directly. Well, which means something between a minute and a half and just a minute. And if your partner is a slow speaker, or well, just the opposite, if they are a very fluent and quick talker and they try to to use this time the best way possible as they think it is, and they try to monopolize the time. Well, yes, until the examiner stops them politely. It might take some of your time, but again, even if it happens, it usually doesn't. We take care of that. But if it happens that in the first part, let's say your partner was asked 2 questions and you just one, don't you worry. There is also part 4 in which this disbalance will be redressed. As for part 2 or 3, the collaborative task, well, of course, if your partner is not a very good communicator, that might cause some problems in the process. But again, it will not affect directly the assessment of your English. If your partner is a quiet, shy, silent person, unwilling to talk, you should do your best. You should be proactive, trying to invite him or her into the conversation, or asking for their opinion, trying to make them more active. If they miss this opportunity, if they insist of being silent and well, taciturn, okay, their problems. But you will get your points for your sensitivity to turn taking, for your attempts to negotiate to the outcome, and that will be fine. On the other hand, the other extreme case, if your partner is very fluent, not necessarily very accurate. Some people just go babbling on and on, making horrible mistakes in basic English, which also will be assessed for sure. But if they try to monopolize the conversation, if they hog up the time given, you should be assertive enough to interrupt politely, nicely. You should have a repertoire of these phrases. Excuse me, could I interrupt you? Uh, Sorry, can I say something here? Well, yes, and I think that, so again, you shouldn't succumb to this pressure of a talkative candidate. You shouldn't just sit silently, politely, nodding at the clever things the other person is saying. It will not bring you any points. And again, you will not be directly penalized, but you will not gain any points for turn taking, sensitivity to turn taking, negotiating to the outcome, well, widening the scope of the interaction. So whatever partner you've got, it's not crucial in your assessment. Just try to deal with the situation in the most effective and civilized way you can. That's why I always practice these situations with my students, and I very much advise everyone to do some role plays or at turns playing the silent and shy candidate and the over talkative one, for the other person to learn to deal with either kind. And the third myth I would like to dispel is it concerns the content. Well, yes, the examiners are friendly, they are well-meaning, but what you should remember is that they are not in the least interested in the true facts about the candidates. Many people behave as if they believe, it's usually not explicit, but as if they inwardly believe that they should tell the truth. They take very many things for granted, as if the examiner should know some things and they don't need referring to. This is not so. Talk to the examiner not to a dumb person, but as to a Martian who is very clever. You know, these extraterrestrial intelligences, but who just doesn't know and should be explained. Well, it starts somewhere at the level A2, B1, but unfortunately it goes on further when asked, where are you from? Especially kids or teenagers say, I'm from Moscow, of course, or some Petersburg, of course, or I'm from Sertalova, full stop. the examiner is not paying attention to these names. What is of interest to the examiner is whether you can, in the scope of these 20-25 seconds, explain what kind of place you are from. Like, I'm from Sartova. It's quite a small satellite town in St. Petersburg, some half an hour drive from the center. So the thing you should keep in mind all the time, it's not the personal details of your life that the examiner is interested in. It's language, only language and nothing but language. So try to be as personal as you can afford it. Try to say about your place of living something that no one else would say. I don't mean some striking originality, but explaining what kind of place it is. Or it's no good to say to the examiner, and St. Petersburg, as you know, is um, the cultural capital of our country, and it is often called the Northern Venice. Every second person taking the exam in St. Petersburg used to say exactly these things. And you know, it doesn't add anything to your individual language. It's just a pre-rehearsed, learned by heart sentence from a guidebook. It's not valued, it's not appreciated. No, of course, you are not penalized for saying for 175th time that St. Petersburg is a cultural capital. But it's so much better to add a bit of a personal touch, which would make your answer memorable, outstanding in terms of vocabulary or grammar. So that's what you should remember. No one expects the whole truth from you. You say not what is the truth, but what you feel comfortable saying. No one is going to check, and believe me, the examiner will forget all these personal details the minute the door is closed behind you. But the grammar, the vocabulary you've used in doing this, your coherence, your pronunciation, that's what would be assessed. Well, I hope I've managed to dispel these three myths existing among the candidates. If you have any questions, you can address them to me through your tutor, and I will do my best to answer. And now, quite briefly, I would like to go through the criteria of assessment, which I'm sure you know about. Just some little tips concerning these. And the one we look at first, the one coming first, is grammar resource. Well, just one thing here. As you all know, our brain tends to function, to work by default, choosing the easiest, the safest thing to do. And the easiest thing would be to speak about something familiar, regular, something you are accustomed to, namely using present simple. Many questions you can be asked at the exam, they imply the usage of present simple, that's inevitable, but try to add things to that. When you are describing pictures, present continuous is, well, it is to be there, it is inevitable, but try to diversify a bit. And three magical tricks I usually practice with my students is conditional sentences. Speak not only about things as they are, but as they can be if your plans are fulfilled. What could be in the unlikely case, some conditionals are, well, are realized, and using the third conditional, adding this touch of regret or nostalgia, speaking about the most trivial everyday things. It's a skill, it's a sub-skill, a micro skill, which definitely can be trained, practiced, and then demonstrated. Another way to upgrade your grammar would be, again, not to speak about things as if you're 100% certain that's how it is, but using the language of hypothesis. It comes in especially handy when talking about pictures. We can't know that, well, a family is enjoying their outing in the woods. We can suggest. So why, instead of they are enjoying, why not say they might be on an outing, they are certain to enjoy it, they seem to be enjoying. Try to use language of hypothesis, language of suggestion, instead of just using their indicative mood. Avoid saying things like, well, I mean, making these generalizations, because they so easily slip into being stereotypes. Well, whenever you say everyone does this, all the Russians do that, all the English people have tea at 5 o'clock. No, it's not so. But that's not a problem. We are not making an entry to Wikipedia. Such generalized facts, apart from not being quite truthful, they involve rather simplistic grammar. But if you say things like, well, quite a big number of Russian people tend to do this, and as far as I know, well, probably more than half British usually try to do that. That would definitely sound better. If you excuse my Russian, I will quote my husband, who is a philosopher, who says in these cases, «Будьте поосторожнее с квантором всеобщности», which means, don't say, все русские зимой пьют водку и катаются на медведях. Не все, if any. Okay, and another kind of structure that I very much advise you to use is relative clauses. Whenever you mention a person, an item, an object, a phenomena, whatever, you can always add some detail, like in this picture, the young woman seems to be reading a letter which she might have received quite recently, because the envelope is lying right here, and it doesn't look as if this letter has been read many times. Something like this. Don't forget about clauses starting with where, when, which, who, or that, which can add some information to your talk and can upgrade your grammar from combinations of short, simplistic sentences to beautiful, compound ones, complex sentences. Getting on with the criteria, a few words about the lexical resource. Of course, we would all love to use constantly all the beautiful words we've ever come across. We've been learning words like to ruminate, discombobulated, transmogrified, and others. Well, sometimes we manage to, not always. What I want to say, don't be shy of using simple vocabulary, but as I usually say, in bunches. The examiner cannot assess what they haven't heard. So if speaking about your place, you, well, you remember the beautiful word amenities, let's say. I'm living not exactly in the center of the city, but in one of the inner suburbs, in a place with most of amenities are just walking distance. So such things as shopping malls, gyms, playgrounds, schools, cinemas, clinics, etc., are quite easy to reach. You know, such names of facilities or names of fruit and vegetables or pieces of clothing or colors, they all seem this childish, simplistic vocabulary. And of course, you shouldn't limit yourself to these. But if you see this excuse me, window of opportunity of displaying your goods, or using this bunch of simple words, but ones that will show your range of vocabulary and that will create an impression in the examiner's head that if you had to speak about fruit, you would give just as many examples. If it was styles of music, you would come up with at least 10 genres, and so on and so forth. Do it. Because sometimes when I ask my students some scaffolding questions, like, yeah, give examples, they say things like, but these words are so simple, everyone knows them. Maybe, but I need to know that you know them as an examiner, and how should I know if you don't demonstrate them? So remember, a range of vocabulary. It's not only these highbrow, sophisticated words which are great, which are fine. I would say the focus must be not so much on separate sophisticated words, but on lots of collocations. But these groups, these packs, these bunches of simplistic vocabulary, but used appropriately and with this impression of complete fluency, that will also be a feather in your cap, believe me. I really don't have any specific recommendations concerning pronunciation. We have what we have. Just remember one thing, even to get a 5 for pronunciation, for FC, for CE, you are not expected to sound like a BBC speaker, especially what with BBC speakers sound now. You must be understandable, or whatever small inaccuracies you make should not impede communication, should not prevent others from understanding you. So certainly, some mistakes are better to be avoided. This very strange tendency of the recent years I've noticed when people try to say, probably trying to say trendy and American, people try to say supermarket, ague, Patna. I have quite a collection of these. Well, of course, this will not do. Maybe you've never done it, and maybe you know someone who does. Check yourself. Mixing up e and a is a very strange trend now, but starting at A2 level all the time, I used to hear, and I hear still, things like, I'm a big fan of football. My favorite dish is pancakes. I don't know why, but recently the idea that English A can be read as A has spread among the people. It cannot. Well, but you know, pronunciation, it is such a individual thing. You should just remember that it's not only about individual sounds, but it's also about sentence stress, word stress, or intonation in general. One more warning I would like to give. Now, a lot of people have this manner, this tendency, which the native speakers themselves call the uptalk, and seem to be quite annoyed by it. Sometimes, well, Beverly Hill girls are mentioned as those who always raise their voice at the end of the sentence and always use this uptalk, which sounds not very sophisticated, not very smart, and quite tiring and rather annoying. Remember, if, well, if you said what you meant, there should be a full stop in your intonation. Or discourse management, the criteria which assesses the coherence and cohesion of what you say, I would just like to remind you that, in fact, we structure our written, well, utterances just alongside the same lines as our oral statements. And so it should work vice versa. Whenever you're answering a question, especially if it is this individual long turn, which is never called monologue, by the way, individual long turn. Yes, I know in Cambridge, unlike IELTS, you don't have time for preparation, but still try to keep the main topic of your talk in mind all the time. Now the questions based on pictures are printed there. Look at them. Don't feel bad about looking at them. It's so much better when a person looks up from time to time at well, the question, instead of drifting off from it. By the way, not long ago, I was asked the question: if I've missed the question as the examiner asked it, can I ask for a repetition? Of course you can. You can always politely, nicely ask, could you please repeat this? And the examiner should definitely do it. But, all is good in moderation. And if, especially in the collaborative task, the examiner has given the instructions, your 2 minutes are started, and then one can says, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't been listening. Could you please repeat it? Well, of course, the examiner will repeat it with a nice, friendly smile. But time will be wasted. Both candidates will have less time for demonstrating their language at their best. So be attentive. Try to listen carefully. It's the work of the short-term memory. Is it so difficult to remember a question, one question at a time for just a minute? But yes, you can ask for repetition. Just don't overuse this privilege. Don't abuse it. Well, again, remember, I've just done it, and is not the best way of connecting your sentences. Though surely we are not supposed to start every sentence with however, nevertheless, furthermore, moreover, and of course, I think you know it, that such big and bulky linkers as furthermore, moreover, they are better suited for the written language. In spoken language, more natural sound things like also, beside, on the other hand. A very good exercise in checking and improving your linking, your cohesion, is to listen to TED Talks. There, people are very coherent. They plan their talks. They deliver them, I'm sure, after a lot of rehearsing. So listening to them, analyzing their speech, and learning from them can be a very good idea. And coming to the last criteria, and I would say the end of my set of tips. Interactive communication, the one which is mostly assessed during your collaborative task, but also, well, the final decision the assessor is making while listening to the fourth part, when it is a three-way conversation, the interlocutor and two candidates. Well, just remember, it should sound natural. You should be, for these several minutes, you should be genuinely interested in what your partner or the examiner is saying. It doesn't look good, believe me. I remember this, well, the situation when in a CAE, I suppose, yes, exam, there was a rather young lady and a young man. She's done her individual long turn. He was asked the question, and then he said, just cool as a cucumber, said, oh, I wasn't listening. Could you please repeat that? Well, fluent he did sound, but it was so, it sounded just so rude, so unexpected. Certainly, neither me as interlocutor nor the assessor penalized him for this rudeness, but he behaved more or less the same way in the collaborative task. So I'm not telling you the marks, but believe me, the lady got a considerably higher mark there because um, she was taking the responsibility for the conversation to go completely on herself, or she took it on her shoulders. Well, he was just from time to time saying, yeah, you may be right. Yeah, I agree. Why come into an exam if you're not ready to, well, to be interactive and to be polite? Well, I suppose it's time to call it a day. One last piece of advice I want to give, and it is based on personal experience. Look, I'm afraid it is quite noticeable that I'm definitely not at my best. I'm not really feeling very well. It seems to be quite a severe cold or something. If I was to take exam tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or even well, coming Wednesday, what I would have done yesterday when it was pretty bad and the day before yesterday when it all started, I would have called in a doctor, be diagnosed. I would have got the paper, well, the proof that I'm really a bit ill. I would have contacted the exam center and would have arranged it with them either to be taking the exam on a different date or if it was not possible to get 50% refund. I know in the current situation when most people take the exams in places like Kazakhstan or Armenia or Turkey, it is not easy. But please, please remember, you can make a 40-minute recording having a running temperature and well, very sore throat. You can do the speaking component of the exam, 14 or 15 minutes. You can do it in practically any state. And I remember having candidates with a running temperature that was evident, with their eyes, shiny and their cheeks flushing, whatever. Uh, it's possible you can do it, and it will not affect the quality of your speaking unless you're really fainting. Another thing is that it is not a very socially acceptable thing to come and put at risk your partner and the examiners. I do remember one case when I definitely contracted something from a candidate who sat in front of me and kept sneezing and sniffing. But what you can really not do, what you shouldn't do, is relying on yourself in such circumstances, or well, believing that you'd be able to take the 3 more hours of the written exam. This is a recommendation from me, not as an oral examiner, but as an invigilator, a person who has supervised, I think, hundreds of hours of different exams, where I have also seen people sniffing every 3 seconds, like driving crazy all the other people around, and certainly their concentration suffering horribly from that. I've seen people doing it with running temperature, and well, believe me, it's not worth it. It doesn't work well. Your results would definitely be considerably lower than of the exam taken in a normal state. So if you feel badly just before the exam, do everything in your everything you can to call for a doctor or to visit a doctor to get the proof of your ill health and to postpone taking the exam. It is not to be done if you are ill. Well, these were the main points I wanted to cover as the insights of an ex-examiner. But again, if you have any questions, please address them to me through your tutor, and I will try to answer them as best as I could. Hopefully, I will be in a better shape and quicker on the uptake by then. I wish you best of luck with your preparation and to fly your exams with flying colors. Break your leg, as they say in theaters.